Today I am at the Web Summit in Lisbon, Portugal. I'm joined with Ailish McCarthy. Ailish, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. Really excited.
How are you getting on at the Web Summit so far?
Delighted. Really happy to be here talking to ambitious people with big ideas, trying to broaden my own horizons and ideas around what's possible for me and my clients and the world, I think, and the internet. There's some big ideas being thrown around, so it's inspiring.
Has any particular idea struck you so far?
Yeah, well, so I've been trying to expose myself more to the Web3 blockchain kind of space and this idea of democratizing the internet, really. And I think I kind of had my blinkers on for a few years around blockchain and Web3 and maybe didn't delve into it too far and then saw it as maybe a bit of a buzzword. And obviously, there was people think of blockchain and Web3, they think of crypto and NFTs or whatever, but it's so much more than that. And I think when you're thinking about democratizing anything, really, you can't, well, I don't feel like I can argue against that. And I think it's a mission that I really get behind. And this idea of data privacy and owning your data has obviously been a big thing for a long time. And a couple of the different talks that I went to over the course of Web Summit were talking about this idea that the blockchain enables, which is you obviously controlling your data, but then, for example, the way Facebook has our data now, or any of the or any of the kind of the bigger data companies.
Everyone has their data.
They are, right? And they're profiting off our data. And this idea came up a few times in a few different ways, but it was around data profit sharing, or I heard the term data dividends or something like that. So that if you could grant companies access to your data if they want it, but you might get a payment for that, or you might get something in return, or maybe you would get I don't know, voting rights or share, you know what I mean? So I thought that was really, really interesting concept in terms of what the future could potentially look like if we get the fire under our arse and make it happen, really, if everyone kind of joins up and starts to do it. So
that'd be fantastic if we could get some dividends or get some money for all the data that's been
for these fuckers
shared about us, right? Not just being the people having our data scraped the whole time. So could you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got into it?
Yeah, so I've recently launched my studio, which is called Sidekick Tech Studio. And I suppose my background is in development. So I studied computer science, linguistics and German in Trinity, which was a strange forced choice. But that was my lack of being able to make a decision at that age. So I was I'll keep one foot in the arts and one foot in the sciences.
Right.
And then I've been working as as a developer ever since. And then after 4 years working corporate, I went and did some freelancing. And I realized that outside of the tech industry, people who were trying to build tech, there was a knowledge gap there in terms of how to communicate with developers. So I was the developer on the receiving end of briefs that were very brief, for lack of a better way of describing it. And then the risk there, I was trying to make up for some of the kind of lack of detail that I was getting in.
Bridge that gap between the tech team and the business team.
Absolutely. Yeah. But so I realized there was a gap in kind of knowledge there and potentially a problem in the market. And then I started hearing all these figures about, women tech founders and venture capital funds, less than 2% of venture capital funds goes to women-led businesses, for example. Even way less for women of color. It's a fraction of a percent. So I was kind of going, I have these technical skills. Obviously there's funding is a problem, but access to the technical information or the product development process is a problem as well. Because then I was hearing of founders going to get an MVP built, going straight to a developer, spending 30, 50 grand and not getting what they wanted back. And it was this thing of not being able to, not understanding the process that was involved before going to a developer, and maybe not being able to vet the developer for their skills as well. So there's a whole kind of product refinement process in the tech world that we do and the big tech companies do before the developers get their hands on it,
Right. So it's not just a case of, oh, I've got an idea, I want to have an app, I'm going to go to a developer, tell them my ideas, and the developer is going to produce
That's
this
risky.
seamless app with.
I would say it's a very small chance of, and you need to be able to prioritize what is most important for your customers as a founder as well. So we all have like this. I was talking to somebody yesterday and they were saying they got a brief that was like, okay, so I want Facebook for dogs, but it's like, there is so many features in, like, that's a huge, what is the problem that you are who is your customer, right? What's the problem that you're solving for them? And then when we get to the actual product that we're creating, it's an experiment in the beginning, because we don't know if what we're envisaging as like founders or, you know, product developers is going to work for the market. So you're trying to keep it as small as possible and push out a small change and push out a small bit and test it with your customers, have early adopter customers signed up.
So do you feel you have to kind of manage their expectations in terms of like, I want the next Facebook or the next Tinder for dogs, or I want, you know, the next Google, except it's going to be XYZ. And you're kind of saying, well, maybe let's start with the minimum viable product and see if we can, I don't know, do you try to generate like, oh, let's see if we can make €1 from this, or let's see if we can make €100 from this, or how does that process go, like managing expectations and kind of reining the priorities in a bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about them talking to their customers, engaging what is the most important thing. I mean, you can sit in a room like as a development team, or, you know, a team in general, and kind of hypothesize about what the customer wants, but like, and you can prioritize a product in that way too. But really the best thing to do is go out and talk to the actual customers. So and
do you find you're helping people then refine exactly what they're trying to say? Because if they say Facebook for dogs, for example, like Facebook does a lot of things.
Absolutely.
So
it's the why, really.
Right.
It's the who first. Who are you serving? Right? Pick that person. What is the problem? Why are we building this? And then the what comes after. You know what I mean? So it's really getting clear on the problem first. And this is like a classic thing that people say, is that often founders focus on the solution rather than the problem because they're visionaries, right? Founders have this idea in their head of like what is going to be the most amazing next thing. And absolutely, like at times they're right, and, you know, at times they're wrong, but like it needs to be grounded in something. Because you need to be able to do it bit by bit. Even for, especially the early stage founders that I would be working with, is like, they don't have a huge amount of disposable capital. So it's like, how can we validate, you know, what you're trying to do for your customers, that it's working for them, and hopefully that might be a stepping stone to them maybe getting some investment.
Right. So you're trying to get you're trying to get a pretty quick return on investment. Even if it's not financial, it's some return on investment of, okay, I've got a valid product, or I've validated the market need. There's a better name for saying that. I think I
think that works.
That's it. Yeah. Okay. We know what that's about. So I validated the product need or the need in the market. But like, so if I was in your shoes and I was trying to like sell that as a service, I'd be like, I'm now worried that if I go and give people hard messages like, okay, we need to do a few more steps there, that the motivation goes down, or they're like, oh, this is going to be longer and harder than I thought. But maybe that encourages people even more, because then they have a clear vision and they can kind of see that, okay, you've taken the reins on this wild horse, and you've, how do you find that goes? Do you think it increases motivation, decreases motivation, or is that part of what you do as well? Like, you know, keeping things going?
I say to people when I mean, I don't know if it's a question of motivation. It's not something that I've thought about in that way, but I do try and make it clear to people in the beginning that my purpose is to challenge their assumptions so that we get a better product at the end of it, you know? So I'm there in order to not criticize anything that they're doing, or pull back anything, or, you know, shoot down any ideas, but it's just to be like, why do you think that? Is there, you know, how do we know that? Do we have that rooted in something? So I'm a scientist at the end of the day, right? Like, right. You know,
so to challenge beliefs, to gather data,
that kind of thing,
to confirm or disconfirm.
The thing about it is, regardless of this thing of like having proof of the need, etc., you need a way to prioritize. What are you going to? You have to do something first. You have to build something first. So, like the logistics of that are always going to be an issue. So this is a really tangible way to help people decide how to build stuff, how to prioritize what goes into their product.
So you mentioned prioritization, like, is obviously one of the pitfalls. Are there other pitfalls that people get stuck in, like maybe prioritizing trying to get 10 features done instead of one feature done correctly? Or do they prioritize trying to get the branding perfect, whereas maybe they just need the minimum viable product? Like, what are the sort of pitfalls people struggle with?
Yeah, branding, I think, is one as well that I've seen for sure. Branding is a big one. Prioritization. I think lack of insight into technical skills would be one as well.
So that's like so then struggling to hire the right people.
This is a really difficult one for founders, because how do you have insight into, I actually wrote a post about this on my LinkedIn recently, is that I was talking to a founder who Bubble is a no-code, low-code platform for like anyone who hasn't heard of it. And it's a quicker way to build your MVP, we'll say, than, to go down the traditional coding route, kind of faster turnover and cheaper as well a lot of the time. But I was kind of reaching out to different Bubble developers, and I was asking, I had asked my network, like, are there any Bubble developers, etc., etc. So then I got a few people reaching out to me. A few people had obviously found me through LinkedIn search, that kind of thing, that weren't in, connected to anyone in my network, for example. And one guy I was talking to, and he was saying that he was a Bubble developer, and I was like, okay, can you just send me some of the projects you've done? So he sent over some projects, and they looked good. I went in, but because I'm had been trained in front end development, I was able to click in, open up the kind of the code in the browser, and see that it wasn't developed in Bubble at all. The 3 websites he sent me were developed in 3 completely different technologies, which are nothing to do with Bubble. They're kind of design tools, more like Squarespace, for example, which is not for web applications at all. How would you how would you know how to do that, or to dig into that if you don't have exposure to that? So that is hard.
You could easily have the wool pull over your eyes.
And I have spoken to a founder firsthand who that happened to. 30,000 euro later, realized that there was nothing to be had from the MVP that was being built for her. Yeah, so
incredible. I spoke to a founder who, once the app was developed, the developer had to pull out of the project for religious reasons, which was fine. That's their own personal choice and so on. But then, as part of that, they also scrapped all the code that they'd developed as well. So
it destroyed the work. So
all the work was destroyed, and the developer was gone, and so they were back to kind of square one again. So he really found out the hard way. Okay, now I'm backing up everything myself on my end. I can't just rely on them. So that talent acquisition of software developers or technical people seems to be a super tough thing to get right.
Yeah.
Obviously, I guess, is it fair to say you have to have some sort of rapport and good working relationship with them as well?
With the developers, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want to be working with people that, I think everybody wants that though as well, right? But I don't know, it depends. I mean, yeah, I think it's different for different people engaging in that way. Some people kind of want to throw the project over and just throw it over the wall.
Yeah.
And it's not going to come back usually the way you wanted it. Sometimes people can be quite impatient, I think, especially, especially like founders are like big into getting things done, taking things off their list, like just sort that out for me, somebody do that, and but like there's a level of involvement that I think you need to have if you want to have control over what's coming back.
Yeah. So is that one of the things you do, that you help to liaise with technical people to communicate? Because I always wonder, some technical people, they might be geniuses at the tech, but the communication could be a struggle.
And they might not want to do, and a lot of the times they don't want that. I was queuing for a masterclass yesterday, and I was chatting to a group of guys from Lithuania, and they're part of a development agency there, and they kind of, help. They do all different business sizes, but it's an outsourcing agency essentially. And I was telling them what I do, and they were like, "Oh, that's the hard part." So they see the technology as the easy part, and the part that I do is difficult because it's not. There's no one size fits all, and it's very kind of unsure, and we're picking. It's complicated, it's complex, and it's nuanced for each client, and it's nuanced for customers, and there's calls that have to be made by the founder based on instinct as well, right? You can't ignore the founder's instinct is a huge part of it. We want to ground that in something. And so a lot of time, and these are when I speak to developers that I'm like planning to work with and stuff like that, they're like, oh, phew, if someone could hand me over a proper like technical design document.
Happy days, right?
Exactly. Like, because, and this is what I say. So what I really I would say what I do is product management, technical product management, right? And I don't know if everyone knows, I didn't know that this was a role before I went into tech, right? But it's kind of it's bridging the marketing with the tech, right? So what do the customers want? And how can we translate that into a solution that is going to help them, solve this need or solve this problem that they have? And so I can't remember where I was going with that.
Yeah, so it's bridging that gap between the marketing team or the business team and the founder, and then the technical people, and bringing that all together.
Yeah.
I think it's a super valuable position, but because you also have to have the business skills as well.
Yeah.
To say this is what we prioritize. Now we need to do MVP. Do you find that in terms of the MVP, the minimum viable product, that founders, they find it hard to let go until it's perfect because
That's
you're kind of like attaching it to your ego or to your, I mean, let's just say I would anyway. I'd be like,
so would I, of course.
I want to make sure this is perfect before anyone sees it.
Absolutely. And I think we're all perfectionists in a way. I think the key really is with that is, having some having some people like that you have talked to before you've even started thinking about the product build, people who are having an acute problem that you're solving, right? So they're experiencing this problem in such a way that they're happy enough to accept the 80% solution and give you feedback on it because it's so important to them. These are your like early adopters.
It's better than nothing, right?
Exactly. And they're your key people. And I think if you have a trusted relationship with those people and you can see that they have enough of a need for this, that they're trying to grab it out of your hands kind of thing, then I think that's kind of the key. It's not like you're releasing, the idea isn't necessarily to release an MVP, kind of a half-baked product to the public. It's not a public release. That's not the original intention of it. The original intention is to start getting feedback from this kind of close circle of early adopter customers, or what you might call, I think I've heard of it referred to also as a high expectation customer. And this is the real marketing side of it as well, right? There's loads of ways, I'm sure, of describing it in marketing. Marketing isn't my background, obviously, but it's a part of what I really enjoy doing as part of this work.
I mean, I would call those super fans, maybe.
Super fans, exactly. Yeah, that kind of thing. Those people who,
as soon as it comes out there, okay, what do you have for us? We'll sign up. We'll check it out.
And they're going to spread the message for you, right?
And if they like it, they'll tell 100 people, and often other super fans. And if they don't like it, they might even just write you an email and say, I love what you're doing, but here's what I don't like.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And they can be very...
that's what you want.
They can be very considerate. That's what I have found if I've ever come across a super fan or something like that of someone's work,
Yeah.
So it's so that's really nice to know. So you're not
different industries. Like it's not just a tech thing. Obviously, it might be even in what you're doing, podcasting. You might have that kind of relationship with people as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or creating content creation. Yeah.
Exactly. So really good to talk to those people. But that also means, and this is sometimes something I talk to with clients, is that means you might have to be okay with other people moving a little bit more away because they're not super fans or they're not the ideal target market. And that's kind of but I want it. Who's your target market? Everybody. And then you kind of have to say, it's not everybody.
It's really interesting because I spoke to a founder recently who was concerned that would look bad, and maybe had also heard from investors, oh, but you're cutting out, there's this thing of like, you're reducing your market size, but it's like you're focusing on a specific customer segment in the beginning, again, to help you prioritize, like any big product or, it doesn't even have to be tech. There's always an initial demographic that uses it before it goes out to everybody. You can't start with the whole market.
It can't be all things to all people.
And then you kind of build for a specific, and then you might be like, okay, we're going to explore another customer segment that our technology is also suited to, or we might build out this feature for a different kind of person. But you do need to, it's all about having a focus. Because if you're building for everyone, you're building for no one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point to start to focus. prioritize. I think if anyone's listening to this, there's two key takeaways, absolute key takeaways already. So maybe a little bit of a difficult question, but I guess if I was a founder and I was coming to you, I was like, I've got an idea, I've got like a Tinder for dogs or whatever it might be. And you're kind of going, okay, I guess there'd be a nervousness, like, am I going to be able to afford it? Is this going to give me a good return on investment? But like, is it a case where you have like workshops where people can get access to your best tips and best knowledge regardless of their finances, and then you have your priority customers, or how do you kind of?
So this is an interesting question, actually, because I do have a webinar coming up. I don't know when this podcast comes out, but it's on the 29th of November at lunchtime. And yeah, I think what I've really started to realize as part of this work is that in order for me to feel okay about like charging what I need to charge in order to, you know, provide that kind of consulting service, we'll say, I want to also be able to provide like content to educate people in that kind of way where they don't necessarily need to engage, and just get the message out there about a lot of it really kind of is like the marketing stuff that you need to do before the tech stuff. Because I think there's a fear of the tech stuff if you're non-technical. And that's why people think of that first. They're like, okay, build it or get it built, or how are we going to build it? But that is like it's the facilitator of the vision. So yeah, so it's really, you know, I'm potentially experimenting with some video content at some point. I haven't really
good on you.
done that too much, but so since I launched, I've been trying to share tips on LinkedIn, doing my first webinar, as I said, and yeah, I hope to continue more of that because I enjoy communicating things in a way that's trying to make tech not so scary for people, trying to make it more grounded. Exactly. Well, I think that's a term I use on my website.
Someone's been reading your LinkedIn profile today.
I was going to say that was very
right,
very coincidental. Yeah, very good. Yeah,
no,
so that's it.
I think that's a good approach. I do the same thing. There's videos and blogs and all sorts of stuff that you can do for free forever. It's all there. All the information's there. And then if you want to do individual stuff or you want to work, then okay, that's at some point I have to be able to charge so that I can continue providing that free content.
Yeah.
So
you don't want to exclude people from. You don't want to gatekeep information because people might not have, because part of what I want to do is democratize access to technical advice, right? So if I was like only providing that to the people who could pay for my services, it would be against my cause.
That's cool. So you've got those strong values there at the core of what you do.
Well, that is like, what I'm trying to do is purpose and values led. So when I started this business, I was like, if I'm going to stay out on my own, because I've been freelancing for kind of a couple of years while I was traveling, and I had to make this decision whether I wanted to go back into a 9-to-5 or set up my own thing. And I was like, well, if I'm going to give it a go on my own for a while, I either want to be making a lot of money in the beginning, which is not realistic, I think, for most cases, or I need to be feeling like I'm making a difference. And actually this is when I decided that kind of the purpose that I wanted to drive me was to even the playing field for non-technical founders trying to build tech products. And
that's super. That's great. That's a nice values-driven mission.
But it's interesting that
approach.
Before I launched, like it was, you know, people say you do need something else that's not financial to drive your business. The fear of starting a business and putting yourself out there and all this thing was a huge barrier for me. I don't post a lot on my personal LinkedIn page, for example. So it was a really big deal, even, you know, podcast, but, you know, it's not my natural type of thing that I would like jump for.
Yeah.
But the fact that I had that purpose behind me kind of made me go, okay, but if I quit this, if I don't do this, like who's behind me doing it? I couldn't see anybody else, you know, sharing the message in the way that I wanted to share it, or maybe in the community that I have in Ireland, for example, or even I've been talking to people in, you know, founders in like the UK and the States that were struggling to find this kind of information. So I was like, well, I have to, you know, fulfill this kind of,
Do you find that helps you get out of your head, let's say, if you're nervous about doing something? Because
definitely. Yeah. I think when you've got a message to share, it's not about you anymore, right? That's the real thing. It's like, it's not anything I'm sharing on there, on LinkedIn. I don't feel like, and there's other connotations about like, you know, wanting to be the center of attention and stuff that are problematic. Why is there a problem with seeking attention? It's a human need. This is kind of like a separate question. But that was the fear that I had, is of being like seen as like attention seeking or anything like that. But when you're sharing a message, it's not about you anymore. So it's like, it's easier to just do it. Not easy, but easier.
Yeah. It's more about the message. It's more about the idea.
Exactly.
Also, I think it's very hard to be the center of the attention on social media and the internet at the moment. So personally, I don't worry about it too much. I'm like, it'd be a long way before I get there.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, I think if I read correctly on your LinkedIn, you're encouraging women, or you're encouraging women to get into technology, or that's something that you care about. At the conference, obviously, at the Web Summit here where we are, there's obviously a little bit of an emphasis on that.
There is, yeah.
Do you feel those efforts are working? Like, do you see evidence, maybe personally or professionally, of more women and girls getting into technology and being more interested in it?
I think there definitely is. And I knew all the stats once upon a time, especially in the computer science disciplines, like at university, for example, because for my final year project, I did like my final year thesis, my undergrad thesis was on recruiting and retaining women in undergraduate computer science. So I did a big, huge lit review and kind of some qualitative research of my own. But I think the younger generation coming up, there's definitely seems to be a lot more women opting into like the actual STEM fields and stuff like that. Not enough, probably, but more than there was when I was there. Is it working? On the other end of that, there's a lot of people dropping out in the kind of I think maybe family having age and stuff like that is still a problem. And you do hear still a lot about bias happening in the industry and that sort of thing. And then what we were talking before, like we started recording about the venture capital figures for women getting funding from VC firms is 2%, less than 2% in most countries. And then for like women of color, it's like less than, I think it might be 0.2% or something like that in America. There's different figures that kind of go around, but around that.
Do you think that's unconscious bias coming to the forefront, that maybe we don't have like models in our, role models in our head of that? Like we see Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Do you think it's unconscious bias like that, or do you think it's something else?
Like
access to opportunities, for example.
There's so many things to it. Like if there was one answer to that question, we could solve the problem pretty easily, And unconscious bias is a huge thing. And there's been research that's also come out recently by a group called Ada Ventures, which is a VC firm over in the UK. And they did a lot of research about the actual level, the numbers of women in venture capital and who the decision makers are in the VC firms. And they're majority male, of course. And so we do, and that is an unconscious bias thing, is we do, hang out with people who look like us. We fund people who look like us. We work with people, that kind of thing. And so, and men are also less inclined to fund women's problems. And for example, like femtech, and there's a lot of kind of women's issues that have been ignored in terms of just not being, what would I say, not being applicable to like, the men who are making the decisions for funding and stuff like that.
Not being given the same attention.
Not being given the same attention, yeah. Because you it's not put yourself in an investor's shoes. If you don't understand the problem, it's absolutely not a thing of like malintent, although in some cases I'm sure there is malintent going on, and so I'm not saying it's all innocent, but you do kind of and you're not going to, if you don't understand an entire scenario or an entire problem that's being solved, then you're not going to put money into it.
It's harder to empathize, and then maybe it's harder to invest that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when more women are making those financial decisions, and actually there's also a group called Awaken Angels who have led by Denise McQuaid and a few others in Ireland who have started an angel investing syndicate, which I have joined, and they're democratizing access to making investment decisions. So early stage kind of aspiring angel investors can come in and get a run through of the process, and they're trying to get more women making financial decisions essentially, because the more women funders there are, the more women founders will get funded, and there'll just be a better balance in the whole ecosystem, I
Which
think.
makes sense because women are half the market. Let's not forget that,
But
right?
I've also heard of people like being in front of investors pitching for a service that is designed for women and saying, oh, but that's just for half the market, you know?
Right.
So,
Okay.
I mean, 50% of the population, let's be clear, is not a small market. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
if you can,
That's worth, well, if you
or
can,
52% even, or whatever it is.
you could sell to half the population, you'd be very,
Right.
very happy person.
So, like, I mean, look, you can't paint any one demographic with the same brush either. You know, people are having bad experiences with investors, people are having good experiences, but I think overall there's just an imbalance of, I think, money decision making at that level. Yeah.
Do you feel that's part of your work and your mission to bring tech and to bring tech education to girls in school or come through college?
I don't do that at the moment. I would love in the future at some point, depending on how things go, to potentially, like, you know, help with internships and stuff like that. It was something I focused on a lot actually in my previous life as a full-time developer. I set up a mentorship program when I was working in Workday, which connected undergraduate women studying computing with professionals working in Workday. So,
Wasn't that award winning?
it did win an award. It was my graduate project. We'll say they let us kind of free rein.
Why was it so successful? Can I ask?
I guess it was just it hadn't been done before. It was more, you know, it was a big piece of work for what it was. Like, it was really engaging with the recruitment team at the time, the graduate recruitment team, who were amazing, in Workday, and running a project for 6 months, which like got a mentor and a mentee together. And
Super.
yeah, we ended up, like, some of the mentees ended up going into the Workday internship program, and then also becoming like fully fledged members of the company as graduates. And then I think some of them are still working in there. So
Wow, that was a super opportunity that,
was
that you were able to facilitate.
it was amazing that I was given that opportunity to go and do that. And like, people in, like, Workday was an amazing company to work for as well, because people were really used to jump at the chance of helping out in those kind of things. So I wasn't I wasn't banging down people's doors trying to get them to become mentors. They wanted to help. Like,
They wanted to give back or share their knowledge.
Yeah.
Could I ask, if somebody was listening to this and they were getting inspired and thinking about, oh, maybe a product manager or a technical consultant, or, you know, something like that would be interesting. What sort of advice would you have? Maybe something you've learned over the years, whether, you know, back yourself or reach out to people or do internships like the internship you helped to set up and run. What sort of advice would you have for them if they wanted to take the first steps or get to know more? Maybe it's watch videos on YouTube or attend a webinar.
there is so much stuff on YouTube. Like, it's crazy. I think it's interesting because, you know, when I was in school as well, there was no coding classes or anything like that. So I chose that computer science degree on a kind of when I look back at it now, I think what I wanted was to be a product manager. I wasn't this is what energizes me, is the putting the pieces together. I do enjoy the coding to an extent, but it's more about the kind of the marketing and the people side of it. But so I didn't even know what coding was like. So that is like, and now you can do so much of like learning how to code on, for example, like Udemy, there's courses all the time and stuff. So I'd say dip the toe in. But the other side of it, so if people are wanting to go down the technical route, dip the toe in. There's like boot camps that you can do nowadays and stuff like that. I don't have a huge amount of experience with that side of things because I kind of went down the more traditional route. But definitely getting hands-on experience is like number one. Like, try and get an internship if you're going to do something as part of, or even like if you're doing an online course, don't do an online course, you know, algorithms and data structures, conceptual stuff. Like, get hands-on nitty-gritty in the beginning, because when you can start to see something be built,
yeah,
and get the value of it that way, it makes it more real, as opposed to learning the theory behind it. Try and learn as much as you need to kind of actually pull something together and build it.
That sounds great. Some really good tips. So, like, you know, watch some videos, get stuck into it, try it out. Maybe attend some boot camps. And yeah, then you'll get a better feel for it. And I think also what you've done is you've started with the coding, you've started a bit, with that. And then maybe you've kind of refined it over the years and say, well, actually, I like the people side, I like the marketing side, I like the business side. Let's incorporate that. And you've really kind of created your own, you 100% have created your own job, your own career.
Yeah.
And so I think people listen to this. That's really nice to know. Like, okay, that's a possibility as well. It's not like I'm a software developer or I'm an architect or I'm a doctor or there's all these careers that solve problems and they come in different shapes and sizes and they've got
Absolutely.
slightly different names and
product management. I don't know what it's like now, but I definitely know that when I was looking into careers in tech and stuff, I didn't realize that it existed. And just to say also, it doesn't have to be, I know product managers who are coming from the business development background or a design background even, so it depends also on like the company you're working in and the projects and stuff like that. So for me, the technical product management is important because I have the technical skills to be able to, but that's not the only route into that job. Yeah.
Super. Ailish, thank you so much for all your insights, your tips, your ideas, and for telling us about your background. It's been wonderful to speak with you and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much for having me.